Welcome back to the channel. Pretty exciting stuff this week. Finally gonna get this into that. So stick around, we'll get right into it. So if you look over here, this is the KA. All put back together and coats of paint on everything. I seem to be a black and silver kind of guy, so that's why the valve cover looks so nice. And I just shot the intake manifold with that cast aluminum paint to make it look newer. Cast your mind back to when I built my genius motor mounts, which are really not that genius. There's one thing that I overlooked, and I'll show you what that is. So, under here, on the side of the block, here are the 4 holes where the motor mount bolts to the block. If you can see, right behind that motor mount is a boss that is now covered up. That boss right there is for an intake manifold brace. This intake manifold brace bolts to those 2 holes right there and bolts to the block, just like that. When the motor mount is in place, there is actually some interference right there. What I think I'm gonna do is loosely blast some of this out with the plasma cutter to try to make enough room, and then maybe try to squeak this piece in there. So I'll show you more what I mean once I get some stuff mocked up, and we'll get a little bit better view. So here is the motor mount I made. Here is the original one that was on the block. You can see this one has a big U cut out of it. You probably won't be able to see up here, but I have scribed just a little mark where I'm gonna notch this piece out with the plasma cutter. Then I'll go back over to the block and mock it up to make sure that that other bracket fits. And if not, I think we're just gonna keep hogging into this. And then of course I will box all this back in or whatever, I'll weld it all back solid. But that's sort of the difference that we're working with here. So I'm gonna cut this out and see how much clearance I get. Okay, so made a little bit deeper of a notch there. See that from the other side. I'm gonna go see if this mocks up nice on the engine. So after a little bit of plasma cutting and grinding, we now have no more interference between the intake manifold support and the motor mount. So I'm gonna weld up that little hole right there and then give this another coat of black paint. Then we can get this thing bolted to, get the motor mounts bolted to the block, and then get ready to throw this thing in the car. There you go, fresh out of the powder coater. Yeah, exactly. Don't worry about how that looks. That's totally fine. Just gobbed the crap out of it with the welder, but should still be nice and strong, and it clears that bracket. I'll show you what I mean. So there is the bracket that supports the intake. And there is our newly adjusted motor mount. And actually that bracket will pick up a little bit because the bolts are loose, but there we go. We got clearance, everything's cool. I think there's another brace that's supposed to go up here, but I don't know if I have that one. And also I think 1 out of 2 ain't bad. So motor mounts are adjusted, ready to be bolted onto the block, and then that thing can finally drop into the chassis over there. I can't remember if I explained this when I built these motor mounts, but I'm using a bushing, it's like a do-it-yourself bushing kit for leaf springs. So this is a 2-inch, I think it's a 2-inch OD DOM piece of steel, and then there's 2 pieces of polyurethane that go through this thing like that. And then there is a solid steel sleeve in the center. And I believe these are designed for a 1/2-inch bolt. So 1/2-inch bolt fits in there nice and snug. There's not a lot of movement in there. So that's what I've got here. The other one is already put together. So I just need to grease up these bushings, slam them inside the housing here, and then looks like I got to touch this up a little bit. It got kicked around. I've built these so long ago. So I'm going to get this bushing reassembled and show you what it looks like. So there's what it looks like when it's all put together. And yeah, there's a little bit of a nick taken out of this one from the first time I tried to slam this all together. I don't think that's really gonna matter. I'm really hoping that the polyurethane that's in these is not too hard, but it definitely feels pretty stiff, so we might get a lot of vibration in the car. I may have to redo this in the future. Oh well, this is good enough for me to get going, at least to get the swap done, and then if I need to, I can always mess with these mounts later. Whoa, hang on, got a little bit excited there. That never happens. So before I can stab the engine in here, I got a little bit of stuff to work around right here. Main thing that I had said I was gonna do, the main thing I talked about that I was gonna do was seam seal all these welds. Some of this I'm not gonna be able to do until the thing's up in the air. So I'm gonna seam seal as much of this as I possibly can under here, and then either shoot it with black paint, or if it's already black, saves me some time getting prepped to be able to put that engine in this weekend. So this is the steam sealer I'm using. I just got this from my local automotive paint supply store. I've never heard of this brand before. Maybe it's good, maybe it's not. Doesn't matter. Seam sealer is caulk for cars. Car caulk. Anyway, get your caulk, get it in a gun. We're gonna spread this stuff all over all the welds. So one tip I learned, can't tell you where, maybe it was talking to someone who's better at this stuff than I am, that's probably where it came from. You can use an acid brush. These are the little aluminum tube brushes you can get from any automotive supply store. You can get a pack of them for $1 or $2 or whatever it is. You can use this to actually kind of smooth out the seam sealer after you spread it. So I'm gonna try that, see how it works. There it is. You probably can't see that very well. Doesn't look great, but hopefully it'll protect all that welding that I did and maybe keep this thing from rusting in half just a little bit longer. I also did the transmission tunnel and up by the firewall. So again, it doesn't look great, but now nobody can say that we didn't do it. All right, back out here today. Guess who's here? Steve 2.0. That's right, means we're gonna get some shit done today. So, off camera, we did a whole bunch of work to this engine. It might look a little bit different from the last time, and I'm not sure where this clip is gonna end up in this video. So, if this is before or after that, whatever. Sorry for the incontinuity. Anyway, everything's painted up. Got a new water pump on there, new thermostat, water outlet, intake manifolds on, including the brace down here, this guy. Yep. And I did have to modify the motor mount to go around that. So what we're up to is we're gonna stab this into the Datsun over there, and then when we're done with that, we're gonna move the Oldsmobile outside, get the Datsun on the lift, and then prep it for the transmission. So trying to get the drivetrain in the car. Viewers, so we're so excited to get this engine just dropped right in. You know, we're just gonna hit that valve over there. It's gonna slam down and hit right, right on those mounts. But we were trying to get this thing lined up, and these Datsuns are so skinny in the front that this engine hoist barely fits between the tires. And actually, no, it fits between the tires. It looks like,
but then
it hits the lower control arms, because this thing is, low life problems, right? So we're gonna blow the bolts out of those motor mounts and get this thing slammed down in there. So in typical ADHD fashion, we decided right now is the time to pull the pilot bushing out. The reason for that being, I do have a new pilot bushing. I don't know that this one even needs to be replaced, but we're gonna do that anyway. So we rented a little pilot bushing puller from O'Reilly. I think it's like 15 bucks. This is my own slide hammer. Thank you to my beautiful wife who bought me that. If you guys don't have a slide hammer, get one. It's freaking handy as hell. This little guy's just got two little teeth that go either way. We're gonna get behind the pilot bushing and just pull it out. Oh, is it working already? No. Let's see. Let's see if it comes out of there.
Nope.
Must have missed. And I think there's also a bunch of junk inside there. Sucker's in there now.
I feel like it's just pulling out again.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad we're replacing this though. This thing is messed up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's just because we broke it with the tool, but I think this thing might have been on its way out. Nothing. Again. I think we did something. We definitely cleared some space. I think so. Okay. Pulling loose.
Yeah.
All right, the old camera off trick worked again. Of course, I know you guys love watching the struggle, but sometimes we think it might get a little repetitive watching us fail so many times in a row. So here's what's left of the original pilot bushing. That goes right into the end of the crankshaft. For those of you that have done engine swaps and builds before, you understand how this works, but for those that don't, the pilot bushing is usually bronze or some sort of softer metal. That slips into the back of the crank, and then the input shaft of the transmission slips into this, and that's what keeps the crankshaft and the input shaft in dead concentric alignment so that you can shift at 7,000 or 8,000 RPMs. Things don't get out of sync or anything. You don't have any weird, shifting problems. So we scored this thing up quite a bit. There's a bunch of score marks in there, but I do also think that this thing is junk. So we're going to use that as justification to do this and put a new one in. All right, so if you need any more justification of why we were replacing this, if you look, this is the original pilot bushing, and here's the new one. There's quite a difference. This thing was definitely, what's the technical term? Wallered out. Sorry, Justin. Anyway, so I did check, this does fit the transmission, and it is the same outer diameter. So we're going to tap this guy in with a socket and get ready to put the engine in. Yeah, we did groove up the edge of the crank a little bit with that tool. It doesn't look too bad though.
It didn't feel too bad when I was cleaning it out. So yeah, I was wondering the same thing if we scored some of the crank.
Yeah, maybe. Probably gonna have to get this started first here. I want to make sure we have about the same lip as the last one. I think this just goes in flush. Ooh, just a little bit more, you guys. Oh my goodness, look at the level of professionalism and the level of precision engineering in this. Oh man, you guys might actually think we know what we're doing. Quick, do something dumb. So, there it is, new pilot bushing. Looks like it's driven in exactly flush with the inner face there of the crank. So that should help, considering the old one was completely torched. We're getting ready to drop this thing in now. Okay, the moment of truth. Turn it. So absolutely nothing has changed since I built these motor mounts, I don't believe. Everything else should be the same. Other than those wonderful brake and clutch lines that still have to be redone. It's just this mess. There we go. Ta-da! Now just remember to be careful of the paint. This car just got out of the paint shop. Huh?
It actually might go in just the right depth. It seems we can't push the lift in any further.
Yeah, right.
It actually might be in a pretty good spot.
It's hilarious with this car because the thing is so damn low to the ground. Where the hell did I put my hardware?
I kept mine.
Oh, I got it in my pocket. This pocket. Found it. Okay. Let's see. No, they weren't yet. Oh, let's this way. Let's hook this way. Oh man.
Nice.
Like a glove or like a Datsun, whatever. Oh God, look how far over you have to bend just to be able to get to the motor mounts on this little thing.
Yeah, what are you talking about? Yeah, it's good for your back, right?
Yeah. Less than waist height. Yeah. Way down here. I know, we got a lift, we'll put it on there in a second. It's easier to put the engine in from out here. All right, so just had to spread those motor mount ears just a tad. It has nothing to do with how I welded it. Oh, almost there. Very close. Damn. Nice. And the bolts even thread on. All right.
Sweet.
Nice. She's in. Right. Yeah, that didn't even go too bad. After putting this engine in here, I don't know if you guys can tell, and maybe it looks better on camera, but this engine is actually kicked over to the driver's side about an inch. I'm not sure what happened with that. I know when we had this thing mocked up in here, it was sitting on blocks. Everything was measured, and you guys watched the motor mount video. I made those motor mounts to this engine with it being in the exact right place. So, unfortunately, and from down here you can probably see it pretty well, the crankshaft bolt is to the right of the hood latch support there in the upper crossmember, the upper core support. So I think we're gonna have to modify this just a little bit further. We're gonna undo the two motor mount bolts and actually pick the engine up and back off, and we will be cutting and remocking up those motor mounts to get this thing in the right place. It's the next day, and I am out here to correct my mistake. So when I originally put this engine together, when I originally built the motor mounts for this, we were measuring this engine, I believe we went off of this corner valve cover bolt, and we were wrong, or at least I thought we were right, but we were not. So the engine ended up being just skewed a little bit to the driver's side. So I just have to cut, trim, and refit my engine mounts just a little bit. I Googled a ton of photos, and apparently with these cars, at least when you use the KA motor, from all the pictures I was able to find online, it looks like the crank bolt, and I'll show you. It looks like the crank bolt of this engine is essentially dead on center with the center of the core support and the support for the hood latch. Now the engine does lean over, and that's kind of the result of the hole for the shifter. In order to get the hole for the shifter to be flat, or the top of the trans to be flat, you have to lean the engine over to the driver's side. Anyway, the crank bolt is now, to the best of my ability, centered in the engine bay, and finally this engine looks like every other one I've ever seen. So what I'm gonna do now is cut and modify the engine mounts that I have, and I'll kind of show you what each one's gonna need. For the passenger side mount, because the engine moved over here, all I have to do with this mount is shorten it. So I think what I'll do is I'll just cut this mount off and then shave a little bit of it off, kind of mock it up and see how much I need to take out of the middle. Then I'll weld the piece back in the middle. For the driver's side, the issue is a little bit more complex. Well, the mount drops in to the tabs and it lines up with the holes. I don't know how well you guys can see that. There is a gap, so the whole mount needs to be longer, but the angle is also different. So I think I'm going to do the same thing with this mount, is just cut off a piece in the middle, and then I will make a new piece to fill the gap with this plate bolted to the engine and with the bolt through the mount on the bottom here. I'll show you more what I'm talking about once I get these cut. So after about 30 minutes or so, let me get you in here. After about 30 minutes or so of cutting, grinding, and figuring a little bit, what I did is I cut this mount in half, and then I cut a little sliver of pipe to kind of fill the gap and change the angle so that this plate can be bolted to the side of the engine here fast with all 4 bolts. So I've got this right here. As far as I can tell, the engine has not changed location. It is sitting right on the cross member with a 1/4 inch spacer underneath. That way I'm guaranteed to have a 1/4 inch of pan clearance on the cross member. As far as I can tell, this engine is dead center just like it was yesterday. I'm going to tack that and then leave it in place while I make the other one. Okay, I'm going to tack it a few more times, try to get it really nice and solid so it doesn't move. Once again, I'm double checking the alignment of the engine based off of the support for the hood latch, which is determined to be center of the car. And it looks to me like we have still hit center on that thing. So I'm gonna start mocking up the other side and get that one tacked. Then I can get them both finally re-welded, painted, and put back on. Okay, I've got the motor mounts tacked up on both sides. They kind of look like lobster claws. Big deal, I'm not worried about it. Once they're welded, I'm pretty sure that they're gonna be just as strong, maybe marginally less than they were before. They're still gonna hold this KA in the car. So I'm gonna do this because I didn't do it last time, is with the engine in the car, centered and lined up, leveled exactly how I want it. I'm gonna weld as much as I can around these motor mounts to make sure that they don't move in between mocking them up and then welding them on the bench. So I'm gonna zap these as much as I can, then pull them out, finish them up, shoot them black, and put them back on to make sure that everything still fits. Well, here we are, viewers. Let me pull the tools off the engine. Bad habits, right? Okay, engine mounts are fully welded on both sides and they drop right back into place. And if you guys can see that, the crank bolt of the KA is almost dead on straight with the latch support right under the main core support here. So if we look down, let's see if I can get a good picture of that on camera here. Maybe not, but it's going to be hard to tell with this camera. Anyway, what I was judging was how, whether or not the harmonic balancer was kinked or crooked. But now the engine is straight in the car, crank bolt lines up. I'm going to shoot some black paint on these motor mounts, and I won't show you those too close because they are ugly. They were cool the first time, but they're ugly now. This is what happens when you're putting cars together and you're not an expert, like I definitely am not. Finally, engine and transmission in the car, good to go, bolted solid. We do have to take the trans out one more time because then we can put the clutch in, but everything is in there, everything bolts up solid, and we are moving on. So next time we're gonna do the clutch, and then maybe we'll get started on the hydraulics. Thank you all so much for sticking around. I really appreciate it. If you guys find any of this helpful, let me know. Leave a comment, subscribe if you like what you're seeing. I'm a regular guy doing regular stuff. Thanks again, have a good one.